Good evening, everyone. I think, first of all, we should really give Mammoth Resorts a wonderful hand for the food tonight. It was like delicious. Woohoo! Anyways, thank you, everyone, for showing up tonight. I know a lot of you were at our sessions today, so it's really been a long day, but we're really excited about our program. But to start our program, I really want to introduce Patricia Robertson. A lot of you know she's the new executive director for Mammoth Lakes Housing. So I have a personal belief that if we're going to really work on housing issues, that it's just not about today. It's really about the next generation. It's about making housing affordable for our children and for our grandchildren. And if you believe, like I believe, then it's really significant that we have a rising star be our new executive director. And not only is she a rising star, she comes to the position with incredible educational resources and a lot of great experiences. And so for those of you that don't know, I'm going to read this because it's so impressive. She has masters in both community and regional planning and Latin American studies from the University of New Mexico, and a bachelor's in social thought and political economy from the University of Massachusetts. I'm telling you, after I know that, I'm going to have totally different conversations with you. So I'm really pleased to introduce to all of you that don't know her already, Patricia Robinson.
Thank you, Mickey. Am I using this right? Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to Mammoth Voices, obviously, for organizing this event. All of our volunteers and organizers, including, I wanted to shout out to Kirsten from MLTPA, the Town of Mammoth Lakes staff, and the Mammoth Lakes Housing Board of Directors, who I'd like to call up here so everyone can see them, so they recognize their faces in the grocery store. So we have Lindsay Barksdale. Come on up here. Tom Hodges, I think. Yeah, I can't see anything. Kirk Stapp is here. Giselle Kenny. John Wentworth and Stacy Corliss.
Excuse me. Let's plug this thing in here. Get you a good light.
Okay, so this is 6 of our current 7 board members. Also, we have Zariah Cruz. She's not here this evening. And at our board meeting on Monday, we'll appoint 2 new members. So we'll have a full board of 9 members. And so we're here to take your comments about housing and programs that you think are important to the community. So thank you. Lastly, I just wanted to thank everybody, all of the participants this weekend. I think it's been really incredible seeing you all volunteer your time to learn more about affordable housing and the solutions that we can create for our community together. So thank you all. I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about myself, which feels a little awkward, but so I'm really passionate about community housing for a variety of reasons. Obviously, my educational background points me in the direction of creating sustainable communities. But also, I have a couple of other reasons. One, I've lived it. When I first moved to Mammoth, I lived in a house with 4 roommates and 2 dogs and landlords that would come and stay with us whenever they chose to. So I've been there and I know what the struggles are like for our community members, and that's really important to me. Lastly, my husband and I have made Mammoth our home, and so we're really grateful that we're able to raise our family here, and we hope that we can both contribute to creating a community where our children can come back and enjoy Mammoth just the way that we have. I just wanted to give a brief Background about Mammoth Lakes Housing, in case you didn't know about our organization. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was founded in 2003. Since that time, we've leveraged almost $50 million for affordable housing projects and programs in the community. That's directly resulted in 82 permanently affordable apartment rental units and 48 homeownership units. We continue to assist renters and homeowners on a daily basis with finding affordable housing solutions. Currently, we have approximately $1.2 million in housing programs and through our partnership with the town of Mammoth Lakes, and that includes mortgage assistance program and also a rehabilitation program for homeowners and owner investors who have properties that may need rehabilitation. In August, we submitted a grant for almost $2 million to convert a commercial property into 11 one-bedroom apartments with 6 garages. So during the last needs assessment, we heard that covered parking was a huge priority and that smaller units were also a priority, and so we're trying to make the connection there and get some small achievements. I just wanted to say that it's been an exciting opportunity here this weekend for building partnerships in our community around this really important goal. And I strongly believe that one of Mammoth Lakes Housing's roles in the community is to build those partnerships and build community around this issue, in addition to providing affordable housing units. And so I just encourage all of you to stay involved. Mammoth Lakes Housing meets monthly, and you can sign up for our meeting agendas on our website. And the town of Mammoth Lakes has a website specifically designated for the development of the parcel. So if you're interested in hearing about what's happening around that specific project, there's a website there you can go to. And this is just the beginning. So thank you for being here.
Well, I don't have the credentials that Patricia has, but I come from a family of dirt developers, and I'm serious about this. The joke in our family was that when we were growing up, our dad would say to us, "Hey, do you want to go to the beach?" And the only sand we'd ever see is like the sand at the ashtrays at the new homes. You know, they don't even have those things anymore, right? So, but I grew up in a real estate family and in a development family, and still to this day, when I see a parcel of land, undeveloped land, almost flat, with really just minor issues on it, it is very exciting to me. And I think this weekend when we started talking as a steering committee what we wanted to accomplish, everyone had a little different perspective what was really important to them. The chamber had some very specific things that they needed to accomplish. For me, it's really about this whole visioning process about what we can accomplish with the parcel. I am an adamant believer that our downtown needs to be a four-season, vibrant area. When I was on Planning Commission, I worked really hard with my other commissioners and with staff to upgrade the commercial code and the building standards to give us the support that we need those things. And I also think that now with the parcel, we have this amazing opportunity to use that parcel as a starting point to really enhance what we're trying to do with our downtown revitalization. So tonight, we've had in the past 3 major plans for downtown. One of those people that really spent a lot of time leading us in various visioning discussions was Aaron Ashley. He's with Hart Howerton from San Francisco. And we asked him to come and start our evening this night so that he could explain to us how, from an urban planner standpoint of view, thank you so much. Okay, are you plugged in?
Yeah, plugged in.
How really that whole land, that parcel, can become ultimately part of our downtown neighborhood. So Aaron.
Thanks for having me. I was here 2 years ago, Tom, and 3 years ago, and we spent a heck of a lot of time with everyone from town council to the mountain to other groups around town. It was really a terrific experience for me because I grew up skiing here. I grew up in Southern California. We spent a lot of time in Mammoth. It's not as easy to get here from the Bay Area. I learned today. I had never driven from San Francisco, so it was kind of a fun ride for my 4-year-old. But there's this one episode of The Simpsons where this monorail salesman comes to town and he's trying to sell the town on the merits of a monorail. And so I don't want to come across like I'm trying to sell anything here. But when Tom and Rusty call, we do pick up the phone, and Tom invited me, and so I'm delighted to be here. But effectively, what we got really excited about a couple of years ago was how to take Mammoth from a great ski town to a phenomenal destination in California. And it has all these incredible natural assets. And so we painted a picture a few years ago, and it's really exciting to see some of those things come to fruition. We talked about how imperative it was the town get control of Shady Rest, the parcel, and here you are. We talked about the value of having more kind of great civic identity downtown, and now the county building, the town hall, is underway, and so that's really exciting. We didn't mention the largest Starbucks in California, but now you have it, so way to go, Steve. But you know, my firm, the firm's been around for 50 years. I've not, but we've the core of our business is how people spend their days, and you know, very often we're working in mountain environments, but we tend to work in really large or really complex environments where what's really key is the experience of being there. And so one of the things I did a couple of years ago when I was here was get on Instagram and sort of take a snapshot of what people think of Mammoth. And it's awesome outdoor experience. It's all the things you all experience on a daily basis. But what's interesting is what's missing, right? So what's not in Mammoth's Instagram feed is what's all over Aspen and Park City and Breckenridge and Jackson Hole. And what we heard loud and clear from the community 3 years ago was this is the dynamic, exciting environment that would be the great complement to what you already have. How do we get the great restaurants, the great farmers market, that great scene downtown where everybody is there all year round, and it's really got an energy and an entropy. And there's a lot of people trying to figure out downtowns, and I say downtown cities, it's kind of regardless of scale, people are thinking hard about why people want to live places, why people want to work places, and why people want to vacation places. And so a group we know that's based in Vancouver but spends a lot of time in the ski industry, actually they're spun out of IntraWest years ago, thinks hard and interviews a lot of people about how they make decisions about where they're going to live and where they want to vacation, where they want to spend their investment dollars. And interestingly, crime, cost, and climate are the sort of leading drivers of all three. Where you spend your time comes back to that. But right there between business and vacation is an exciting city environment. And then right there between business and places to live are availability of housing affordability, and commute time. And so the issues you're tackling this weekend are sort of right in everybody's mind. What's interesting is when these guys sort of step back and say, well, what do you do with all this information and all this data that we've analyzed, and how do you kind of go forward and make a place? They had this kind of great, so I stole this from them, great sort of dumb thing. If you can make it lovable, it will be prosperous. And so, you know, this sort of tension we've had with downtown Mammoth has always been, how do you get people out of the village? How do you get people off the mountain? How do you get people out of the supermarket parking lot and up into a place where they're walking around, enjoying each other's company? And how does it happen? At 8 a.m., at noon, and in the evening. You know, since Mammoth was founded, and certainly since I started skiing here 35 years ago, resorts have come to become different things. You know, there was a time where Juniper Springs was sort of the cutting edge resort environment, and Mammoth was at the forefront. I mean, what's great about Mammoth is it doesn't change. The main lodge is untouched in seemingly 6 decades. But while Main Lodge has been sitting there, there's been a lot of really interesting innovation in the resort space. And what's interesting is one of the coolest resorts I know of is a town in Costa Rica. And so this is a resort as town. And so everything they've built is in the spirit of a town. There's an inn, but everything you buy is a town. And the biggest piece of land is about half the size of this room. And so you sort of think about like what a resort is in the future, and it doesn't have to look like it does today. We spent a bunch of time thinking through what do you do when 28-year-olds buy a ski mountain? And so these guys bought Powder Mountain in Utah, which is a really interesting, odd ski mountain. And they wanted to make it kind of the center of their culture and event space. And the thing they really wanted to do was build Aspen. And we said, why do you want to build Aspen? Well, because we all love Aspen, because Aspen is so much fun and dynamic, and the restaurants, and it's a real town. It's not some crummy fake ski village. It feels real. And so we set about to think about how do you make a kind of a bespoke town for people to really share ideas and be together. It used to be a football stadium was like a ski mountain. It was a standalone thing. And now a football stadium is just piece of a very integral mixed-use environment. So we've been helping the Rams and a number of other people figure out what they're doing in LA. So this is a $2.5 billion stadium that's just a small piece of a very exciting mixed-use environment. And the reason that 2,500 families are going to live next to the stadium actually has nothing to do with the Madonna concert or the Rams, and certainly not the Chargers. But it's that there's shopping, there's places to work, there's places to eat, there's places to live, and the residents are actually what make it attractive for people to visit. So if it didn't have the residential population, this thing wouldn't hold together. And so now, my sort of latest test case, and I can't actually show it to you, but the building at the top of the screen is the original Facebook campus. This building here is a big Frank Gehry designed Facebook building, and all these industrial warehouses are the next campus for Facebook. So Facebook, whether or not you're on Instagram or on Facebook, there's 35,000 people that work there, and it's an enormous thing. And they're struggling to get people to really want to work there and stay there. You know, how do I keep these kids in Menlo Park? Because I can only pay them so much, and I can only give them so many hoodies. And so what we're helping them think through is how do I make a 2 million square foot office campus and a full, believable, authentic mixed-use environment right in front of it. So 1,500 to 1,700 units of housing, a hotel, shopping, and if somebody shows up and it feels like Facebook, we'll have failed. And so this idea of incorporating housing to give the authenticity to a real place is a big idea. And that's why from the get-go, we thought Shady Rest or the Parcel was a key part of any sort of regeneration or excitement of downtown. So before getting to downtown, I just kind of want to go through a case study because I think it's kind of interesting, relevant, and it's happening right now. Big Sky, is anybody big into Big Sky? Yeah, so Big Sky is in the middle of nowhere. It's beautiful. It celebrates all the great things that Mammoth celebrates about being outside and having this incredible national park an hour away or less. The road that you arrive on is at the bottom of the screen. You come up through this valley, the mountains at the end. What's different about Big Sky from Mammoth is it's got the Yellowstone Club, which is probably the greatest concentration of billionaires on the planet. And if that weren't enough, it has this thing called Spanish Peaks and another thing called Moonlight Basin, which in their own right have tons of people worth millions and millions of dollars. And those people have actually gotten quite bored with all of their money and all of their friends. And so the Tom Bradys of the world and the Bill Gates of the world got together and said, boy, it'd be really nice if there was a real town here so that we could spend more time up here because we really don't need to go back to Seattle or Boston or wherever it is we live, and we'd like more to do. As it turns out, one capital group owns the majority of the 33,000 acres that's on this page, and we happen to do everything they ask us. So we set about to help them think through a downtown. So Big Sky had a plan for a downtown, and it was well-intentioned, and it was thoughtful, and they couldn't figure out how to implement it. And so people went to other parts of town to build housing, they went to other parts of town to build a bank, and finally somebody drew a plan. And actually, sessions like this built a plan that was kind of designed by the community. And it was a thoughtful plan, and you can imagine that at the top there was, that didn't work. There was kind of a main street and a plaza, and then there was a bunch of residential and one of these and one of those, and it was great. And then they actually built in a market cycle in the 2000s, buildings 1 through 7, excuse me. And it's a terrific draw, right? People come, they have a great farmers market, and it's exciting. But it wasn't an 18-hour place. It was sort of a Sunday place or a Saturday afternoon place, and it doesn't take. What was shown up here as a hotel, someone came in and built a hospital. Sort of one of these wealthy guys, his kid got hurt, decided they needed a better hospital. They built a hospital. And then someone did something really exciting, and they built a brewery. And so the brewery demonstrated, and this is the hospital, this is the brewery, and these are the things that it started. And the brewery kind of demonstrated that this was an attractive place. And when hospital workers started going to the brewery for lunch, which seems funny, but right, they have to eat lunch somewhere, so they start going to the lunch. And other people who work in town started to see this as a place that, hey, this is my town, right? So this is where I'm going to go every day, as opposed to driving to disparate parts of the community. And so Cross Harbor, who is the money behind most of the Big Sky development, started to bankroll really small-scale projects. And when I say bankroll, they wouldn't always be the developer. They would develop key pieces. So they developed their own office building. This was something we dangled in front of Tom and Rusty for a while, and it never took, but we'll see, Tom. And so they built their office building downtown in a really cool building by a famous architect to say, hey, this is where we're going to set up shop. They're nearly finished with a limited service hotel, which gets a bad name in a lot of towns, but when I show you the rendering, you won't think it's limited service. It looks like a very cool urban hotel. And then they set about to build buildings that always had residential above. And those residential units are all built in a partnership with a group that's kind of like Mammoth Lakes Housing, and it's all rental. So everything on Main Street is rental housing on the top floor. This is that limited service hotel. This is a loft building. And this is that developer's, each one of these projects pencils on its own. The caveat being there's too much retail, right? So one of the big ideas the town had was hundreds and hundreds of residential units next to downtown to energize downtown. But then the town got kind of stuck in approvals of the housing. And they thought, oh, these guys are going to build all the retail. I don't need the housing. The retail's going to be great. And the retail's struggling because the housing's not there yet. And so this retail housing dynamic is so key. So now it's kind of interesting, and you sort of think about the components. Big Sky has a town, and it feels really cool. And it never had one before. And even though it's new, it doesn't feel synthetic. But what's notable is it's the place where everything happens. It's where the farmers market happens. It's where the bull riding, they have a big PBR event every year. That's where that happens. The music festivals, the Christmas festival. And there are people there all the time. People work there, people live there, and people come there for everything. They come there for civic uses. They got to go to the post office. They got to go to work. They shop, they eat, and of course they can live there. And again, it was sort of incremental. And so it wasn't something that we necessarily understood how they were going to implement, but it's really kind of a testament to a partnership between developer, who in this case owns the mountain, the town, and then basically a not-for-profit housing group. And so we think it's kind of exciting, and we're now trying to get the town out of their own way to get the residential green lit, to give this stuff a little bit more energy before the rest of the spine can get built. So, Mammoth. 3 years ago, we started this talk basically saying, this has got great bones. And Mammoth has this incredibly loyal following. It's a good-sized town. It's as big as Park City, but you'd never know it based on the town, right? I mean, you know, the urban feel. It has wealthier people coming here than Vail, but you just don't get it, you know, in the feel of downtown, and certainly not in the accommodations. But Mammoth has this incredible magnetism for LA and for California in general. But what was exciting to us is the bones of downtown are there, basically at Tavern and Old Mammoth Road. And you had this civic campus and this really cool courthouse and the hospital and, you know, more land and interesting places. The town actually has a little land. And then there was this Shady Rest thing, which, 3 years ago was in the hands of a group that didn't want it and was looking for every way to get rid of it. And so it was sort of awesome that the town was able to figure out how to get their hands all over it. And one thing Mammoth excels at is drawing up plans. And so I feel like I'm part of like this incredibly long legacy of drawing up plans. But when we were working here 3 years ago, these were the highlight 8 plans. And they actually get good plans, which is sort of better than most mountain towns. So ERA were sort of the experts at economists in the world. And when they came to town in the last market cycle, they said if Mammoth is ever going to survive, it needs a downtown, a town center. It needs meeting space, and it needs a marketing NGO, a tourism group. And so actually that third one happened. If there's ever going to be a hotel in town, I think that'll happen. And number 1 just hasn't happened yet. And so then they invited another group to town in 2011 who's also a really good economist, and they said, boy, we need an urban core. We need this place to be 4 seasons. It needs to be attractive. And what was interesting is it wasn't one of these reports, but actually somebody kind of screwing up on TripAdvisor that checked Mammoth as the gateway to Yosemite that really kind of helped trigger or kind of reinforce Mammoth's great summer destination. And so now we're really talking not about summer and not about winter so much, but about the shoulder seasons, which are always the death of a resort town like this. So we drew up a plan based on about 9 months worth of interviews and interrogation, and we forced it to kind of pass the sniff test of developers. So we talked to Jim Demetriadis, who had the Parcel, I guess he probably still does, on Old Mammoth Road and Sierra Nevada Road. Chuck Landy, who has a lot of land in town. And we kind of forced these folks to think about this from what would it take to get them to invest. And we were sort of thoughtful about, gosh, how could you just make incremental changes to get it done? And Steve, we tried to lure him in with more than a Starbucks to get this hotel in the corner, and maybe he still will. But what's interesting is the bones are all there, and so we were so excited to get the call that the town had tied up Shady Rest, and that the town had, in the county, sort of thought, okay, let's put this civic building here. And if you think about what that means, that's warm bodies, which is our word for people with money in their pocket, even if it's only a little, that will patronize this thing. And the spending power of a person who even spends $10 a week in downtown because they live next to it, and that's 2 coffees or something, is powerful when you think about the economy of a downtown. As opposed to just driving through the little, well, I guess it's not there anymore, the drive-through coffee shop. Now you're actually walking downtown. And so how do you get people out of their cars and to really energize this place, even when the snow's piled up? And we actually took it a step further, and it wasn't our words so much as playing back what we heard from the town, which is, you need this downtown. It wasn't that you could have a downtown and some planner came in and said, yeah, you can have a downtown, but you actually need it for your residents. You need it to attract the next generation of folks. When you have the fastest internet speeds in California, and nobody wants to come here and do those kinds of businesses because it doesn't have that cachet yet, that kind of urban feel. So how do you get that? What was really fun to watch from afar was to take the basically 2-hour talk I gave on this 3 years ago and turn it into actually an action plan. And I think your downtown revitalization plan is terrific. And it hits on all those key things. And from our standpoint, Shady Rest plays in, or the Parcel plays in really well to this. Downtowns have civic sites. Right now, the post office is out on Main Street. We'd had an idea that we could put the post office right downtown. Now, working with the federal government, there's no greater pleasure. So even if you didn't have that, you've got this campus of the hospital, the courthouse, now the town hall, the police station. That's a great amount of bodies who are here 5 days a week, all year round. What could we do at the other end of Tavern to sort of reinforce that? So one idea we have is that if you take Mammoth Lakes Recreation's laundry list of wishes and desires, and I know someone's here from Breckenridge. I was hyping up the Breckenridge community pool complex when I was here 3 years ago because I think that's just one of the cooler places in that community. And if you could build that, or you could build a daycare, or you could build a transit facility like Park City has, on one corner of Shady Rest, leaving the rest of the parcel for housing, you'd have the key component that would help kind of get downtown going. The other key component is a connective public realm. I think, we all experience places, and it's the sidewalks, it's the street trees, it's the benches, and the way that somebody thought about public art. And, we did a quick rendering, and I don't even remember what direction we were facing, and we probably got rid of some buildings who are owned by somebody in the room here. But we wanted to say the kind of experience that Aspen has, or that Park City has, that Big Sky just built, is close at hand. You don't have to just keep complaining that we get too much snow and we have nowhere to push it and we can't have it downtown because we have too much snow. These guys, it snows all these places. And so we got really excited about this public realm, and I know the town has talked about it, and I think that's actually an easy one for the town to do. A harder one for them to do is to pull off some kind of a partnership to get housing and critical community facilities kind of co-developed on a parcel that's sort of right next to downtown. Not just next to downtown, but connects, this neighborhood of, I'm not going to use the name I know it by, but this neighborhood, which right now has to go out to Main Street and around to get to Tavern, it actually becomes the connective tissue of town. And if you think about, where people live in Mammoth full-time, they generally live in this sort of banana belt. And Shady Rest is a sort of obstacle, or this sort of terror zone, depending on how you think of it. And if it could be a couple of streets that knitted everything together, the downtown is integrally linked to where people live. We talk about downtowns, in New York, it's a 22-hour place, right? It never sleeps. In realistic cities, it's 18 hours. But if you could have a downtown Mammoth that had a pulse 18 hours of the day, from 6 a.m. coffee to 10 p.m. drinks, or 12 p.m., that becomes a place that's really magnetic for people showing up late from the airport or from a long drive, for people who are getting off a shift, to all sorts of walks of life. And that's the kind of downtown that people are drawn to. There's something, the village is nice, but there's something very developed about the village that doesn't feel as town as what a real downtown could be. One thought we have for Shady Rest, or the Parcel, is that right now you have a parking facility at the corner of Tavern and Old Mammoth Road, and clearly Tesla is very invested in it. We had hoped that parking would lead the way to develop in downtown. Basically, if every building has to park itself, you get grocery outlet, which is nice. It's pulled up to the street. It's going to be a nice amenity to downtown, but it's only one story, and it's only as intense as it could afford to park. And so parking is the calculus of development. This is downtown Park City. If you have been there, you know that there is no parking for any of the buildings on Main Street. In fact, they've even removed parking spaces along the street to put outdoor dining and other things. That's all accomplished from what's inside the red circle. There's a parking garage and a transit hub. And those two things next to downtown mean that anybody can come in and set up a business here knowing that they don't need to have all the parking they would normally have to have, and that the people will know how to get there, they know how to use transit, and there's always a supply of parking, even at Sundance. And so if Mammoth could build that, carve out some part of the parcel as this thing, this great parking asset that would unencumber the rest of downtown for development, we think that's a really powerful idea. So kind of just in summary, and I appreciate I sort of rambled a little bit here, is, we're still really excited about Mammoth's shot here. You walk down Tavern and walk down Old Mammoth, at least those first 4 blocks, it seems really doable to me. You've got some sort of big buildings, you've got some big tenants that aren't going anywhere, which gives you a certain amount of certainty. You know there's people there. Now you're going to have thousands and thousands coming from all over to the Starbucks, Steve. So it's, you're just already got this sort of excitement kind of coming around here. So you've already got the pieces in place, and it seems to us Shady Rest is just this perfect complement of warm bodies, full-time residents at whatever level of affordability makes sense, to energize this place in a way that's really meaningful and feels really local. And so whether or not it ever ends up as exciting and fabulous as this rendering was meant to imply, I think we still are very encouraged at Mammoth's chances. So thanks.
We will have a formal question and answer period after, but if anybody has an absolute burning question that they just can't wait to ask, yes, burning question, Mayor.
Sorry. Yeah, and nobody's growing anything in Big Sky either. In fact, it's worse than here. So farmers market is my parlance for there will be 3 months of the year where people will bring vegetables because they will buy into it over time. There will be one vendor on the first time, and there'll be a couple of food trucks and 3 reggae bands and you know, a bunch of people making leather, and that's okay because it's sort of coming together. And so Park City started the same way, and and so I don't know what it looks like, but it's something that if you had the venue and some other group is going to take it on. But I think you have to just hope that you're the kind of town where someone wants to figure that out. Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
we'll work on that.
Anything else? Okay, great. Thank you.
So okay, go to the next one. How's that bank account doing, John?
It's going down.
What we're really the way I see this evening's presentations, a couple years ago, we would send our town officials out on peer resort tours. So what we've done now is we're bringing different peer resorts to us. And it's really a fabulous combination of people that are going to speak this evening. And what we're going to do is we're going to have be a group presentation. Wendy Sullivan, who was our facilitator today on our short wins and the continuation of our community housing action plan. Lori Bess, who spoke last night and really just piqued people's interest about what the town of Breckenridge did. And then the person that you haven't met, other than seeing her in the video, is Cindy Brown. We become like soul sisters over the last 24 hours. But Cindy Brown had a long, distinguished career both as a planner and with the housing department in Boulder, and she was one of the original people that conceived of that holiday neighborhood project. And I don't know, for some of you that are just here for the first time, that project was a very similar project in downtown Boulder. It was like 27 acres, and we really watched this whole video about what they did with that project. So I believe, and just, I know that some of you are tired of sitting, so we're going to do these presentations, and then it's going to be a very interactive session. So we're going to start with Wendy.
Thanks. So I actually didn't realize that we were doing a little bit of information about Big Sky for this, but since it was brought up in the first discussion, I figured I'd say a few things. We actually just completed a housing needs assessment and action plan this year for that community. So hearing that housing is missing from that community to help keep the downtown vibrant and all that great money they just poured in, absolutely on par with that one. And we have worked with them on a plan to hopefully bring that in. They had, and this might make Mammoth feel a little better, they had 40% job growth over the past since 2014, in large part because of all the fortunes of money that were poured into downtown to bring in the hospital, to bring in a new grocery store, to bring in all that retail. They needed 500 units to house the employees that they needed to fill all of that. They built over 500 homes. However, 80% of them were priced $750,000 or more. So, needless to say, they have a big housing issue. So, completely on par that they need housing. Basically, what I'm up here, though, to talk about is I was going to throw up a bunch of examples of just various products, various affordable housing projects done in other areas, for examples, various product types and using different types of materials, and also just kind of some innovative ways in which some of them are done. So I'm going to try to keep it relatively quick because I know Basically what this is doing is showing cool things that can happen, and then Lori and Cindy talk about how they can take all of those cool things and make them into a great neighborhood. So that's how it'll fit together. But basically, just as an example, I'm going to start with some rentals. So this is Anthracite Place in Crested Butte, Colorado. This was built right in downtown. It was actually built in the historic district. They used federal low-income housing tax dollars for it. Couple unique things about it. Number one, the money to do the matching funds to get their tax credit dollars, which you need to bring to the table, was pulled together from employers, from community foundations, from donors, from community members, and from the local governments. So it was a conglomeration of the community getting together to create these units. The second thing is it was built in the historic downtown. They went through 26 design meetings. Not recommended. Please don't do that to your affordable products. This one is Redmond Street Rentals. This is in Jackson, Wyoming. This is 28 units on about 1.29 acres, so it was about 22 units per acre. They had parking lot with covered garage, and these were built really geared for upper management families. Most of them are 2 and 3 bedroom units. They are pricier. They're built for 120% AMI or above for rentals. So they are market, kind of the high market level in Jackson. This product actually was built on town-owned land, and they do have partnerships with the local businesses to help fill the units. So a lot of businesses have master leases on the units for their upper management that are looking for homes. And so this fits a unique niche to really try to keep the families, the move-up families, and the growing families in that community, because that's really what they've been losing in recent years. And this is just the ground plan, so it is kind of more in the urban area. These are Truckee Artist Lofts. These are not yet built. I learned from Steve earlier today that this has been something that's been in the planning for 16 years, which I didn't realize. But that's also been delayed for starting construction a couple of times. But these are going to be low-income rentals. Most of them are going to be 60% AMI or below. There are some market rate rentals in there as well to help make it pencil for the developer. But they are going to be stacked modular. So it's using a different type of product. As is going on everywhere, it's really hard to get construction labor. Stick-built's really expensive. A lot of these areas are experimenting with how can we use modular or other resources or structures that are built outside of the community to help reduce our costs to get these on the ground. This one is obviously broken ground. It's Coburn Crossing. It's also in Truckee. It's going to be, I think, about 138 locals-only rentals for occupancy. This one is really up here because it's being built by a group called Triumph, and they have also built a product that I'm going to show you in Vail called Chamonix. It's an ownership product, but just to show that developers in mountain communities do move around. And so if you see product that you like in certain areas, reach out. They might come here and do something cool. This is also going to be a stacked modular complex. So some for sale, we have Paradise Park in Crested Butte, Colorado. So this was land that was acquired by the town through an annexation agreement, and it was divided into 52 smaller lots, most of them like duplex, triplex lots, and really ranging from units below 80% AMI up to 200% for ownership. The concept behind this one was the town of Crested Butte wanted to get unique units in and not have a uniform development. So that's why they created separate lots to go to separate owners so that they would get different type homes on those as opposed to having one developer and have everything look cookie cutter. Now they did run into challenges obviously on the duplex lots because you have a different owner in each duplex, and trying to get them to coincide on the design is a little bit difficult at times. But then they do have a block of lots too that they have sold a few to self-help. So they've gotten some really low-income units, 50% AMI through self-help build. And then they've also sold block of lots to some developers recently because of some of the issues they run into with the duplex. So. Now this is Chamonix Vale, and so this was really a product that was targeted more to sort of the middle income move up buyers in Vale, the families that were being forced out and wanted to stay. So again, these are more expensive townhomes. Prices in Vale are higher than here. So affordable is actually $400,000 for a family looking to move up into a home. So anyway, but these were 32 deed-restricted townhomes. These are modular. And the interior of the units, this is how it came, was like this, minus the furniture and appliances. So when this thing was shipped to Vale, that's what the inside looked like. So they didn't have to do any of the cabinetry, they didn't have to do any of that. And so again, it was a way of trying to see if there's innovative product that you can make look attractive in the community and help keep some costs of construction down. Now this is Benedict Commons. This is in Aspen, Colorado. This is actually operated by the Aspen-Picken County Housing Association up there. And it's 27 condos. They have underground parking. They do have storage units associated with each. These are primarily studios and one bedrooms. And so it's really targeted to the workforce, smaller homes, to keep them in the community, in town, within walking distance of a lot of their jobs. And this one actually is the highest density one, 78 units per acre. So just showing what design can do. It doesn't have to be just a box of 78 units that's 5 stories high. This is Hall townhome style condos, and these are again in Jackson, Wyoming. These were built at about 25 units per acre, so there were 12 total. They offer separate bike storage, which is up in the upper corner, is where the bike storage is, and separate garages, and they were all 80% AMI or below. Half of these units were built through Habitat program, so they were 50% AMI or below. And this was actually built on land that was purchased with special excise funds through the town and built by the Housing Authority. And then this is an example of a mixed-use product. So we heard a lot about trying to integrate housing with other uses. This was done in Boulder, Colorado, kind of in a downtown area. 50% of the units were affordable for sale, and this incorporates a daycare and nonprofit office space along with this. I actually have one of the women I work with, it was the first home that she ever bought when she was in Boulder. And she said the daycare was awesome because she had just had her first kid. But these units actually started, they were built back in the late 90s. They started at about $150,000 for one of these cottages. They're now, so starting at that time, that was about 105% of the area median income. And now they're around 300,000. But the average price home in Boulder is well over 800. So for where these are and for what they are, it's a good price. Now, of course, all the rage these days is tiny homes. So obviously there's examples of those that are all around. Affordable housing project in Telluride actually has a combination of units. They have some below market rentals, including 18 apartments, some boarding rooms, and 3 tiny homes on the lot to use some of the shared amenities from the boarding rooms as well. Aspen Ski Co., which I think quite a few in this room are familiar with, actually had an RV lot that they had purchased with a campground, and they needed housing, so they bought a bunch of tiny homes and they threw them on the lot for the winter. They expanded the number of units this year because they were so popular, and they actually increased the size of a couple to put 3 people in each unit as opposed to just 2. But then they add they have a shared central office space and laundry space and lounge for the people at the tiny homes to hang out in, do their laundry, etc. Now these things, I just like the name, Juicy Pods. But this was a project that was actually proposed for a lot that was owned by the town of Jackson. And it's from a group, the group I believe is out of LA. But this was actually slated to be a combination of seasonal dorms plus smaller one-bedroom units for the single workers and a few two-bedroom units with the dorms on the first level, the one-bedrooms with some dorms on the second, and then some one and two bedrooms up on the top. So try to integrate a lot of the core workforce housing and workforce people into one place. This was a really dense development. It was in the center of downtown. But the juicy pods are cool because they come pre-made and you just kind of stick them together like Legos. And so, anyway, someday it'll get built. Anyway, so we're here to talk about the potential of Parcel, which has been brought up a lot. These are some ideas of various products that are out there, and these guys are going to talk about how to bring some of those ideas together into reality. So, thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, I have to use the mic. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh. Okay, I'll start there. There's just so much more friendly than standing back there. So some of you were here last night and got to see the video that was made about the development of the Holiday neighborhood. It's called Designing a Great Neighborhood. So those of you who were here got a little introduction to our neighborhood and got some details about green features that were particularly done by one of the developers, a co-housing developer. So I'll be trying to build on that a little bit, provide a little bit more detail, and then answer your questions. And we're really hopeful that what we can do is show you some examples, some more examples, that key for you what works for Mammoth Lakes. Because what works in Breckenridge, what works in Boulder, what works in Telluride may or may not work here. But hopefully it jogs your mind to say, oh, something like that, or if it was only a little bit different, would work here. So that's our purpose. And I love to talk about the Holiday neighborhood. I was a project manager for the master site development, so kind of the overall concepts of pulling everything together. And so I'm going to tell you about that, but hopefully in the back of your mind you're thinking what works in Mammoth, and hopefully we can get some question and answer. And when we finally come to the end of this, what I'm excited to do is hear what you have to say. So I have some questions for you all at the end of my presentation. So I'm going to preview those for you, and then hopefully Lori can get her slides loaded up, show you her slides, and then we can just talk to you and say, hey, what are you thinking? What are your dreams? What are your hopes? So that's where we're driving to. So that's what we're going to do. So let's see if I can. I really don't like that podium. Let's just see. Okay, see what works. Okay. So aiming high is kind of the idea for all of our presentations. You know, how can you aim high? You guys have an awesome opportunity here. A piece of land owned by a public entity with the intention of doing affordable housing. An incredible opportunity, really, really exciting. So aiming high, you know, what do you want to aim high for as a community? So I see I have a typo in my slide, so I just want to say that. I've looked at the slide 100 times. So hopefully nobody else sees it, but that's the first thing that I notice when it's this big, like, oh, look, there's a missing letter. Okay, so to the left, the Holiday name comes from, this was the Holiday Twin Screen Drive-In Theater in Boulder for 20 years, from 1969 to 1989. The first movie that was shown there was Easy Rider. So classic time, you can kind of place it in time. And after the theater closed in 1989, this parcel was annexed to the city. It had been in the county. There was a major annexation process for North Boulder to bring North Boulder into the city. The drive-in parcel came in at that time. I love to show the contrast, because this was before. This is what the sign looked like when we purchased property. So it was obviously awesome. This is called Googie style. There was only a short period of time where things were designed in Googie style, and that's what that is, whatever that really means. But it was awesome, awesome sign. It flashed, violated every sign code you can possibly imagine. Totally garish, just love it. And then what happens is it's almost by magic, right? It went from what it was to this beautifully restored, you know, to the height of its glory. all this housing, and this is a community garden. So this is kind of a before and after shot, and I like it because it shows what can be done. But this took 10 years. So I also want to be realistic just in terms of what it takes to actually get something complicated done. So after all that land was annexed in 1990, the city did a real smart thing. They did a sub-community plan for this area, which means they just tried to look at, well, what could happen here? What do we want this to look like? How can this contribute to the city? And you'll actually see that our parcel was somewhat on the north end. So if you look to the left, the little red square, that's the Holiday area. And this was a plan done by the city, and I love to look at it. You can see the outline of the Holiday parcel, 27 acres there. And they just said, well, what if? You know, what if there's a park in the middle? And what if there's a variety of housing? And they had all these ideas for what could happen here. And so this was actually incredibly helpful, that there had been a lot of thinking done, and the neighborhoods around there were very engaged. So we weren't just coming cold to talk to people. People were already thinking about this good stuff. One of the things that wanted to happen here, this isn't Holiday, it's an example of new urbanism. And new urbanism is, you know, the buildings up close to the street, parking on the street, the rest of the cars hidden so they don't dominate the landscape in a suburban fashion. So these are some of the principles of new urbanism. Also, variety of product type, mixed use, these are all things that were envisioned in the North Boulder Subcommittee Plan that I think are excellent planning principles for the most part. So here's the timeline. There's the 20 years that the Holiday Drive-In operated. There's the city annexing the property. And what happened in 1995 is that subcommunity plan got done. The North Boulder Subcommunity Plan got done. Well, it so happens that in 1990, when that parcel came in, there was an approval for that parcel to have a big box warehouse retailing use. 120,000 square foot, I don't know if you guys have Costco's, that kind of thing. But by the time they had done the subcommunity plan, they realized they didn't want a big box. The city wanted to see, you know, they wanted to see affordable housing. They wanted to see mixed-use development. But there was a problem because there was already this approval in place to do a big box. So at that time, I worked for the city of Boulder. I administered their housing trust fund, which I'm excited to tell you about. It was a local source of funds. But the city had an awkward position. They didn't want this big box anymore. And so I was sent out to acquire this piece of land. And 27 acres in order to be able to bring it more in line with what the city wanted to see happen. So that's what I did as a staff person. Then I went over, BHP stands for Boulder Housing Partners, which is the housing authority of the city of Boulder. And it operates, it's a sister organization to the city of Boulder, but it's independent. It has its own board, it has its own powers. So I basically went to Boulder Housing Partners, where I had worked before, took the land, took the debt. So that's an important thing. You guys on your land don't have debt, which I can't tell you what a beautiful thing that is. Because we had $4.8 million worth of debt. And we had to start paying for it. So that was a lot of pressure on the development process, especially when it was moving so slowly. So I'll talk at the end a little bit more about the financing. So then the only other point I want to make here is you can see there's several approvals that needed to happen. These are city approvals. So we didn't get in the ground. We had groundbreaking at the end of 2002 in December. We didn't get into the ground with our project till 2003. We finished the infrastructure, which was part of my organization's responsibility. And then for the next several years, our development partners built out their housing units, what developers call the vertical, right? So you guys picking up some developer lingo. The horizontal is all the streets and utilities, and then the vertical is the actual housing. So one thing that I was really excited about is we did a very engaged public process. We had a barbecue out on our site. We invited everybody that lives close by. So I'm really excited to see some neighbors of the parcel here tonight, and elected officials and everybody who was interested. And we started to talk about what could happen here. And we got some guiding principles from this process. We wanted to have design that was compatible but had a lot of variety. We wanted to finance it in such a way that it actually worked, that it could pay for itself, even though it would take getting a lot of grants also. A variety of different people could live here, and there would be a market for those homes. And we wanted to have public and private sector partners. One of the objections from our community was people in the private sector didn't feel like a public entity like the Housing Authority, Boulder Housing Partners, should be the developer lead. So that's a discussion that you need to have. You know, public and private have different needs and they have different expertise. And in my mind, the best thing is to bring them all together and really make that happen, make the best of the private and public sector work together. So we actually built a Lego model, which was super fun. So we've been thinking about, you know, how can you engage people in a way that's fun? And you can see that it's starting to take shape. This is the park. This is where the old screen used to be. And this is a concept to have an inflatable screen so you could still come here and see movies exactly like you used to, except you're sitting on the lawn rather than sitting in your car, because that's exactly where the screen was for the drive-in theater. And the different colors just represent different uses. So down here is more of a commercial element integrated with housing, townhouses. So this was kind of a concept plan. Now this is something else. You can see everything is yellow. These are all yellow Legos. So there was a group of people who wanted to see a mobile home park built here. Mobile homes can be a very good, affordable option. But when we looked at this, we said, this isn't variety, you know, this isn't compatible design. This can't serve so many different incomes. We can't do commercial. So there was a decision made that, yeah, mobile homes really weren't appropriate to do here. But we did take a detour, we did build a model, and we looked at the financial analysis. So it was a real honest look at what was proposed. This is more what it looks like now. So you can see again the site plan, the color background, the different uses, and you start to see some different housing types. You know, down here, this is more of a duplex. These are townhomes. There's live-work units. This is a studio muse with artist units, so you can work downstairs. There's some garage doors open. You can live upstairs. And I like this. This shows the same thing, but the idea of connectivity. So here's where the transit is. The transit is on Broadway. So you can get here on a bus every 15 minutes. You can go to downtown. And this is the front door of the neighborhood. This is where you enter the neighborhood. And then this is the heart. This is where the park is. This is where a lot of the action happens. Then you can walk all the way up through the studio muse to the community gardens and to where the restored sign is. So it all works together. There's a bike path here along, this is the highway section. And the whole neighborhood is very walkable. Down here, there's the pizza restaurant, there's a gym, hair cutter, coffee shop. So this is where most of the commercial happens, there on the front door. Okay, so this is a great thing because you can see the construction has started. Here again is the park in the middle. A lot of the units taking shape. The developers all built out kind of at the same time, so that's a coordination issue. If you saw the video last night, there's all kinds of water cleansing things built into the park. So when water falls or runs off, it's cleansed before it goes back into the water table. We also had a joint construction recycling program. So we tried to do as much green as we could in the main part of the construction coordination. Okay, so now I'm just going to run through. This is the front door, the coffee shop, you get a sense of the architecture. We had design guidelines. So we selected 7 different developers, but we said, here's the design guidelines that you need to understand, but then we want you to do what you do. Because we have a lot of great developers in Boulder, and they knew how to do, this is mixed use, so it's commercial, and then it's residential upstairs. So we had a process where we had people submit their letters of interest, and we selected what we thought was the best fit for different parts of the site. So 7 different developers, a lot of diversity, but working within design guidelines. So I'm just going to go, these are some townhomes as you move down the main street. These are actually along the edge, and in back of them is the bike path, but they all face inside away from a very busy road, and they kind of hold the edge of the site as well. This is Studio Muse. This is really an active part of the community. You can see where people have garage doors open. So there's artists who work here, there's architects, there's some nonprofit offices, there's therapists, there's just kind of all kinds of different people working in here in addition to artists. The crescent is this idea of a kind of a curved street that looks out on the park. And this is how it looked under construction. And this is the park. So there again are the crescent units facing the park. Park is very active. I think this is like a health fair where people come out and really, it's a 2-acre park. It's a nice size. It's not huge, but it gets a lot of use. Also, there's a little lending library is what this little cute little thing is on the left. And there's this beautiful playground that was built by the City Parks Department. Again, the coffee shop. This is a community garden. These are places where people gather, where community gets built. The project has been featured in a couple of books just to talk about its sustainable aspects, so that's what those are there. Northern Lights is really a beautiful part of the site. These are duplex homes that face this center green, and this is where a lot of families live. It's beautifully landscaped, and it looks more beautiful every year. Wild Sage is what you heard about last night in designing a great neighborhood. And you can see that also nicely landscaped. With co-housing, the homes are actually smaller, and there is a lot of common space. So they have a beautiful, beautiful common building and a common green. So this is where the kids gather to play. This is the common house where people come together a couple nights a week and cook meals together. So everybody has a full kitchen, they have a full unit. It's just smaller. And I love the discussion last night in the movie about there's a wood shop where everybody can come and share the same table saw. And there's a meeting space there. There's actually a space where your guests can come stay. Because maybe you don't have extra bedrooms because your unit is small. But you know, when your mother-in-law comes to visit, she gets to go over and stay in the co-housing community house, which I think is a beautiful solution myself. Okay, so just some outcomes. The cars don't dominate. We do have on-street parking, but the rest of the parking happens in the back. So it's not just about the cars. And then where are the affordable units? So we'll show the numbers. There's 333 homes here. There's about 138 affordable, both for rent and for sale. And you just can't see them. They are invisibly integrated. So there's not an affordable housing building, which is always a temptation. You know, let's build one big building for all the affordable units. I say don't do it. Because everybody who lives here, nobody knows who lives in the affordable units, and it doesn't matter. It's like a real neighborhood, you know, where you have people of all ages, all incomes, and people get along. I mean, it's a pretty amazing outcome, really. One thing that was really fun is when we decided let's keep the history of the site. It's so important to so many people, and so we got a grant to help renovate the sign, and we did an art contest, and we got these great reels that are in the park. And so we're really celebrating the history of the site and making a sense of place, so it's just not anywhere USA. So there's Easy Rider, for those of you who have actually seen the movie. And now what happens is there's movies in the park. So in the summertime, and it was really fun, the first movie that was shown, first they did a kids movie, Wallace and Gromit. And when the kids went to sleep, they showed Easy Rider again. There's also in the Studio Muse, there's a street called Easy Rider Lane, which is the most coveted address in the Holiday neighborhood. It's a very cool address to have. So just in terms of the finance, so a big project like this, you have to break it down into stages. So the first stage was getting hold of the land, which you guys have already done at the Parcel. Then there was the infrastructure, which is, you know, the streets, the utilities, all of that kind of boring stuff, but the stuff that you have to get done. So that had a whole separate financing scheme. And then the vertical housing, all of the actual real homes where people were going to live. So the land acquisition was funded by our CHAP, which is Community Housing Assistance Program. It's a combination of property tax that everybody pays if you own a home and a fee paid by developers. So it kind of spreads the burden out among all different people. Because there was a big argument about how much the land was worth, we had one appraisal that said it was worth $2 million and one that said it was worth $6 million. We finally paid $4.8 million, but the bank was really nervous. They didn't know what it was worth. So we had to use city reserves for a short time to back the loan, which is pretty unheard of. It was a risk the city had never taken before. And then we had a long-term loan that allowed us to make interest payments for a little while and then switch into principal payments because it took us so long to get it done. So it was great to have a flexible funding source. Infrastructure, we did it pretty old school. We just got a bank loan, and then as the developers came to get their parcels, they paid us, and we paid off our loan. So that was probably one of the simpler parts of the project. So rental housing is a pretty complicated thing. Boulder Housing Partners decided that they would buy 49 units scattered throughout the site. So they're in most of the parts of the site, there are rental units. And they were financed with low-income housing tax credits and all of these other sources as well. It takes a lot of different sources to do rental housing, usually. So kind of working towards a summary here, 333 homes on 27 acres. It's over 40% affordable. The rest is market rate. There's 60,000 square feet of commercial, and then you can see that all of our different partners, some government agencies, nonprofit builders, and then private sector builders as well. So just a point to make that there's both affordable for rent and affordable for sale, and these are all permanently affordable through different means. So I like this. We decided that, you know, we were kind of excited about how it came out, and so we took it out there just to say, hey, we did something innovative. It was considered very risky. We think it turned out pretty well. And we got a series of awards, both design and affordable financing awards. And my favorite one was this one at the bottom, Cottage Living. Does anybody know Cottage Living? It's such a beautiful publication. And it's all about great places to live in the United States. And we won that year for one of the top 10 neighborhoods for our, our small yet beautiful units. And it was for neighborhoods with soul. So I thought that was really, really nice to be recognized in that way. So a couple lessons learned. I don't think I'll read all these. You can kind of take a look. It's important. You have to be patient because you do get sidetracked, and it's hard, and it takes time to get public input. It's absolutely key to get public input, in my opinion, but you have to take time to do it. If you try to rush it, it's really not going to work. Local funding, you have to have local fund sources at the table to be able to draw these other sources of funds. You know, breaking down the project. In our case, the market rate housing helped carry the cost of the affordable housing. It was an important part, and it also created kind of the neighborhood with the different income levels. You can do it all as affordable at different income levels. I think it could work as well. We did a focus group, which is something I think is really great, where we invited people in who might want to live in our neighborhood, and we asked them, what do you think? What should be the right balance between for rent and for sale, and for affordable and market rate? And they helped us figure it out. So we just didn't sit in a room with a pencil and try to figure it out. I mean, I think you have to ask people who are going to live there, who want to live there, to help you figure it out. We had a great master site planner. We made enough money to pay for our staff and to invest money in our rental units. So we operated like a development company. We made sure the whole thing worked financially, but we kept the prices lower, so we didn't take as much money as a private developer would need to stay in business. So there's all the tools, engaging the public, the guiding principles, and then paying attention and respecting what's already there. Who are the neighbors that are there? What are the edge uses? What are the systems? Is there transit? Are there bike paths? And the public sector developer ensured that public benefit was always the top goal. You know, we had our private sector partners, but as a public sector person, we made sure that everything that was done was benefiting all of the people who were going to live there as well as the entire community. So sense of community, these are kids that live there now. This is the kind of street fairs they have. These are the co-housing kids. Couldn't be cuter, right? Such cute kids. When we were doing the public process, people told me that a lot of their kids were actually conceived at the drive-in theater. So I just thought it was kind of beautiful because I know it was like, whoa, I mean, sometimes, yeah. Good stories. Sorry, I got kind of distracted. Okay, so, but you know, now there's a lot of kids being born here, and it's a great thing. It's really a vital, you know, lots of action because of the kids. I think is really wonderful. Okay, I'm going to go back and just make a transition here because now I want to move into the parcel. Okay. You have him here? Why don't we cue that up and let Lori get her stuff done, and then we're going to come back to the parcel. Okay, perfect.
You're gonna have to advance it by hand.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, no worries. Thanks.
Well, I'm back. This is great to be able to talk a little bit about some of the projects that we've been working on in Breckenridge. And I think I mentioned last night that I started working on affordable housing for the town in 2000. And since 2000, we've added about 800 units. So about half of those are rentals, the other are for sale. About half of those have been developed by the private sector and half have been developed by the public sector. So I'm kind of just going to go through sort of how we were able to see some of this housing come to fruition and actually get developed. Because even, my background's a planner and I love plans, but I actually like doing better than planning. So it's really fun, and I just wanted to start with this slide in case you guys have forgotten what it looks like to be in the snow. I have to mention it again. This was the day I left coming out this way, and oh yeah, it was snowing all right. I think it'll get here, don't worry. So the first neighborhood that I wanted to talk about a little bit about, last night I mentioned that, our housing program started with the town taking not as proactive a role. Our role we viewed as to support the private sector in their development. We viewed that housing development belonged with private developers, and the town didn't really have a role in doing that. That was our initial program, but actually Wellington Neighborhood came out of that sort of thought. This was a public-private partnership, and really the town provided fee waivers and some incentives to help the project pencil, but this was done by a private sector developer, and it was part of an agreement that was negotiated in return for the contributions from the town, but the risk was on the developer, and it took, started in 2001, and we are just wrapping up the final units of Wellington Neighborhood in 2018. So it's been, 17 years, and about 300 units have come online slowly but surely, about 4 units per acre, about 85 acres. And, this is a neighborhood that went through a long master planning process as well, because, making sure you know what you want is key, because, then you can figure out how to get there, and, kind of where there's a will, there's a way. So I think it's important to have the vision to begin with, and I really liked Cindy's guiding principles about, building community, not just building beds. This is a mixed-use community. We have 80% AMI pricing in here, all the way up to 150% AMI pricing. So, that translates to units that were in the $200,000 all the way up to units that are being sold at $650,000. The way the developer financed this is they were allowed to construct 20% of the units as market rate units. So 80% of these units are deed restricted, and the developer used the proceeds from the market rate units to sort of buy down the prices of the other units. I think it really is important to have mixed income neighborhoods. It makes it a real town or a real community, and you can't tell which are the market rate units, which are the deed restricted units, which are the 15 or the 80% AMI units or the 150% AMI units. There's a common architecture, and everybody looks out onto a public green. And it's just, from our perspective, the mixed income is really an important component of this. Kids, we got kids too. I'll show you some other pictures of kids too later, but I'm not going to take too long because I know we want to get to Q&A. But on the, some of the pros and cons with a public-private partnership like this. From the town's perspective, we're not driving the bus. So, the developer needs to make a lot of decisions that are going to minimize their risk, and we don't always align 100% on some of the decisions that the private developer needs to make. And were we to do this again, I think, in return for the concessions that we granted, we would have probably liked, we've learned a little bit about the level of the deed restriction and maybe how to ensure that units stay affordable over time. And so there were a lot of lessons here learned in terms of kind of the level of control we'd like to exert if we have a lot of public investment in these properties. And that's the thing you give up when you do a public-private partnership. You're not driving the bus anymore from the public perspective, but you also don't have the risk. It's a really cool neighborhood. It's on a grid, really traditional design with the garages on the back, so the cars are not as obvious either. So very successful. This is another project. This one might have more similarities to your property. This is some property that the town owns. We call it Block 11. It actually used to be an old airport runway, so it's a long linear parcel, but it's 25 acres, and the town acquired this property back in 2000. It basically had no density on it because it was an airport runway, and it turned out you really couldn't take off in planes and get high enough to get out of Breckenridge. So the viability as an airport wasn't great. So it stood vacant. But as you can see, it's right along a river corridor. It's at the entrance to town. It's very flat. It was a runway. There's an elementary school on one side. There's a college on the other side. And it was basically about 25 acres. Surrounded one side river, one side school, other side college, and then there was some commercial on the on the top side of the project. Existing buildings, you can sort of see them grayed in. And so this was the site that the town acquired, and we master planned it. We acquired it in 2000. We didn't really even master plan it until 2006, and I think it's really important to go through that master planning process, that visioning process. What do you want that project to be? For us, we left it very vague. We wanted it to be affordable housing. It could be rental. It could be for sale. Building types were pretty flexible. We had a height limit of 3 stories. But it could be single-family homes, it could be duplexes, it could be multifamily, whatever the market would bear at the time when the project was going to come online. So as the owners of this property, we actually are the developer of the infrastructure and also of the vertical. We started developing this site about 3 years ago, and started with 30 apartments, which we actually self-financed. It costs us, I'll talk a little bit about that project later, but 30 apartments. Then we started on some townhomes as the next phase, so we sort of phased it out and are doing a combination of rental and for sale. And from our perspective, when we have a parcel this big, it was important for us to break it down into buildable tracts, kind of like what they did at Holiday. And really the only difference is that we're acting as the developer in this situation, and we're sort of phasing it from north to south as we develop it. But you can see the different tracks that we've delineated, and yeah, it's coming on slowly but steady. I guess it's just steady process, Here it is, an aerial shot, and you can see in the foreground are the townhomes, and you can't quite see the apartments, which are off to the right. You can see the river corridor. This is a shot in the fall, so it looks very green or brown, but it's really very green. Subsequent to this photo, we've developed a park space. Kind of right in the middle, there's a triangular parcel you can sort of see there, and that's been converted into an awesome little regional and community park. And then we will be building down, you can kind of see how it was a runway, but we'll be building down towards the south with our next projects. And I don't have a slide of the next project, but it's about a 5-acre site, and it is going to be apartments, and it's going to be really exciting because it'll be the town's first venture into modular construction. We are going to be probably ordering our boxes sometime in January, and they start delivering in July. And the benefit to modular construction is it can happen very quickly, and the boxes are built in really enclosed environments, and they can be very well done and well built and very tight in terms of energy. So that'll be an exciting new adventure for the town of Breckenridge to take on modular. We think it's one way that we can reduce our cost of producing units, because ultimately we've got to figure out a way to do this so that we can provide these units at lower price points for the users. Let's see, this is just a close-up shot of one of the townhomes, and I think I mentioned last night we had 52 townhomes, and they all sold, and our last two closings are last week they were supposed to be, but they'll be in a week or so, but that's the last two closings in the 52 townhomes. Denison Commons is a apartment that the town also built, and this was an interesting one, and some of the statistics are on the right side of your slide there. But this is, we're providing these units at a rental rate of $1,000 a month, and that's affordable in Breckenridge for a one-bedroom or a studio. These are out on Block 11. They were one of the first sort of developments that came out of the ground on Block 11 in terms of the vertical. And it turned out that, we paid about $5.7 million to build these apartments. But we did have a master lease with the local community college. And not only was it a master lease, it was also a option to purchase. And very happy to say that the college has exercised their option to purchase. And so they're going to be paying us back the $5.7 million that we spent to build it. And so we're selling these units to the local community college, and a lot of those students at the college are actually in our workforce. They go to school, but they also, work downtown in retail, or they work in the coffee shop. So from the town's perspective, it actually still was about workforce because the students are actually a key component of our workforce. So, and we'll get our money back on that one. Rentals can be very difficult to finance, as Cindy alluded to. This is another apartment building that the town built recently, opened it up in July of 2017. It's on a different property. And we did this one as a partnership between the town and the county. And we actually financed this with tax-exempt debt. So certificate of participation is what we call it. I don't know if that's available to you in California, but basically we were able to finance the entire $8.6 million project. We had to put up an asset, so we just put up town hall, and hopefully we'll be good on our debt in case there's a problem. We lose town hall, that would be very bad on my watch. So, but it's good. So the county and the town sort of have committed to share in sort of operating these apartments, and the project generates about $300,000 a year in terms of rental proceeds, and our debt service is about $600,000. So that basically means the town and the county have to split that $300,000 a year in terms to cover the nut. But these are two-bedroom units, and all of our neighborhoods, we make sure that we have great transit, very walkable community. And this was a great financing option for us on rentals. We have tried low-income housing tax credits. We did a apartment complex about 3 years ago that was a LIHTC project, and I don't have a slide, but LIHTC is such an important way that a lot of communities finance rentals. From our perspective, we had to give up a little too much control, particularly in terms of sort of the income testing and the qualification process we found to be very, very difficult to get people into a LIHTC financed project. So the more sort of funding partners you bring in, you just really need to be aware of what the strings are that are going to be attached. With our LIHTC, we had a wait list of probably 150 people for those apartments, and by the time we went through the criteria to meet their income testing requirements, we were basically barely able to fill the 42 units that we built. So, and yet all of those other people needed housing, and they needed rental housing. They just couldn't meet the really strict criteria. Another issue that we have with LIHTC is, all of our housing, regardless of whether it's for sale or rental, we may income test at the initial purchase or when you move in, but we hope you will prosper in the community and do well. And, some of those federal programs, they are going to be income capped forever. And actually to the point where if you start to do too well, you have to move out. So it's really an important consideration when you think about using LIHTC. What's your values in terms of people being able to stay in their units as opposed to getting sort of forced to move out? And then there's really no place for them to go, because unless you have a variety of housing options and price points, if somebody gets kicked out, they're going to have a hard time finding another place to go. So I'm only going to talk about maybe one or two more, but Valley Brook neighborhood was probably our first venture into the town acting as a developer, and it kind of happened by accident. We thought we were just putting the land under this project, and it's about 4 acres and 41 townhomes, and we had contracted with a local nonprofit housing developer, and unfortunately they got very nervous as we were approaching 2009, 2010, and so they were wanting to get out of the deal, and we had the design in place, and we decided let's just go ahead and keep moving forward and build it anyway without the private sector developer. Turned out we saved a lot of money. We didn't have to pay a developer fee. We had a lot more control on the design and the architecture and what price points we wanted to set, because we as the town had a little bit more flexibility than the private sector developer had. We didn't need the profit. And so actually it was our first venture into us assuming full responsibility for being the developer, and it worked out great. And the family that's pictured here, I'm talking about kids, they moved in, and 3 weeks later they actually had their baby in the house. They decided they wanted to have their baby at their house, and so that was the first baby that was born in Valley Brook neighborhood. And there's a bunch more there now, but we were all happy to know that not only did we provide the house, we also provided the place where the baby was born, so that's cool. Blue 52 townhomes, these are the ones that have been coming online now. We're doing our last closings, and this picture was a while ago because they're finished now and people are occupying them. And it's interesting, the thing that I find interesting about Blue 52 townhomes is 52 townhomes with the price point between 80% AMI and 130% AMI. We almost cover our costs on this. The project cost is $20.6 million. Projected sales revenue 20.5. So in terms of, we are funding it up front, but we are replenishing our fund with the sales revenue. And so, when you think about, who's going to do your development for you, I think you do need to weigh, what you view your role as the community or, the town, or, and then, are you willing to bring in a private sector developer? Just understand that you lose a little bit of the control. So with that, I'll conclude. I think we're going to swing back to, holiday. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for your patience while we queued up the end. This is last couple slides, and we're going to wrap it up and then open it up for a couple of questions, and then hopefully get the opportunity we have a flip chart here, so we want to start asking you all some questions and also set it up for hopefully the next time you all come together and start to look at opportunities, particularly on developing the parcel. But so just the last couple of things for you to think about here. So of the concepts presented at the summit, what, if anything, would you be most excited to see happen here on your site at the parcel? And start to think about these sentences, complete these sentences. The parcel will be a success if. The parcel will be disappointment if. So from your own perspective, what would represent a success in your mind, and what would be disappointing if it were done there? And then kind of the last question to begin to think about is, what's my dream? Is this a place that was going to be a good neighbor to some place where I already live? Is it a place I want to live? What benefits could this bring to the community? And the dream is the beginning. The dream is creating the vision. And then from there, you have to to start to get down to details. What are the principles that are going to guide your decisions here so you can make consistent decisions as you go, and begin to balance. In my mind, the dreams and the vision are the poetry. You know, it's the poetry of the site. How is this going to live? And then you balance that with the financial realities, which we call the pro forma. So the pro forma is the finances. So it's all about balancing the poetry with the pro forma and making something that is beautiful, that adds to your community, but works financially. So I just have a quote, and that's one of my favorites. A guy named Jonathan Rose is kind of a legendary developer. He also founded a jazz label, multi-talented guy. Founded a bakery that employs formerly homeless people, and they send brownies every day. They make 34,000 brownies every day in their bakery, and they send them to Ben and Jerry's. So it's a beautiful story. He's an inspiration for me. So here's a thing he said. All things begin in poetry and end in real estate. So you all have an amazing opportunity here. You know, you have this site, you have the opportunity to work together as a community and create something that's beautiful, but then lives and makes a great place for people to live who are in your community already or who come to your community. So that's it for our formal presentation. Thank you so much. That was a lot of information. Hopefully, somewhere in the back of your mind, you're beginning to form ideas for what you'd like to see happen. So what I would suggest is we're just going to take a couple of questions, and then I think we have a wrap-up. And then we're just going to stand up here, and we're going to be by the flip chart. And if you want to come ask us questions, or if you want to come tell us, hey, my dream is this, we'll just hang out and give you the chance to interact in that kind of way as well.
All right, this was really exciting. So we need to switch now to our Q&A lighting. And that's right. And Lori and Wendy, yeah, we're going to all get up there, put the chairs up, please. Aaron, you guys can all come up and join them. Right. Or you can put them in the audience.
Are you ready for the first question? All right. Before I do that, I just want to say, for everybody that's here, to all of you that came here to see us, we owe each other a round of applause for doing this, so come on. Last night, during the day, the countless steering committee meetings that led us to tonight, thank you for everybody that did that. So I think the question, and I'm sorry if I missed it last night because I had to leave a little bit early, but the numbers and the pictures of what you all have already done they're just amazing to me. The first concern I have is we just have our parcel, which is going to be limited, obviously, in scope and how many units are available. So I'm curious, I picture a lottery here. I know you talked a little bit about, people being able to qualify, and obviously there will be those qualifiers, but did you run into problems where you had hundreds of people that actually qualified, and did you run out of spots? And then how did you even handle that? Because I picture everybody in Mammoth clamoring to a spot, and then there not being enough. And thank you again.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit to that. We have phased our development so they come on over time. And I think it works out to maybe 35 units a year coming on average. But when we're releasing a new development, and say it's the 52 townhomes, we will definitely have a lottery, and we'll definitely have more people that qualify and want to live there than we're able to offer. And basically, all we can do is keep working towards new projects and new developments. But our lotteries, oh yeah, we had a lottery. We did it Facebook Live, and we actually had big rolling machine that was a lottery, and we had ping pong balls. The way we set it up was, the longer you had been in the community, the more ping pong balls you had in the lottery, because we did want to try to, support the people that had been there for a while already. And it's really interesting. We do find in all of our neighborhoods that the people that end up buying into the neighborhoods have been there a long time, and they've either been living in overcrowded or cost burdened, or they're driving an hour in the morning to get to their job. So it's really interesting when you actually look at the demographics of the people that do get in. But yeah, it is competitive. We have the lottery live on Facebook, and we don't invite people there because sometimes it's just too disappointing. But people watch it on Facebook, and then they're welcome to come on down and celebrate a little and see their unit, and it's really exciting. In terms of key employees, no, there's no special preferential treatment for sort of town of Breckenridge employees. We just didn't want to prioritize one single business or one single entity. And so right now, no, we don't prioritize the key employees, safety and fire and police. But certainly when you look at our communities, we have a lot of the 52 townhomes that we just finished. It's almost like police corner. There's a police chief, there's a sheriff. It's like, oh, don't park where you're not supposed to park. Yeah, but it's emergency service personnel, it's teachers. It's really cool to see the core, the heart and the soul of the communities get into these neighborhoods.
Hi, thank you. Thank you all for coming and sharing your experiences with us. I have a question for Cindy. It's a two-part question, but we heard last night that in Breckenridge, when the town owns the land, that they mostly do 100% affordable units. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit of your experience about how the town decided what AMI levels to serve and how much market rate you would include on the holiday project. And the follow-up question to that is, in Mammoth, we know that locals compete with the second home market at all price points, and so affordability by design doesn't necessarily apply. And so do you have any sense of how many of those market rate units in the holiday project were occupied by the workforce and or long-term residents?
This is a better one. Okay. Yeah, that's much louder. Whoa. Okay. The process was somewhat organic in determining how we were going to do the different affordability criteria and how much affordable and how much market rate. But a lot of it actually came, from their public process, having people say that, in their mind, to make it a real neighborhood, it should be a range of incomes. So that was kind of a general principle. And then when we did the focus group, we talked to people who might live there and talked to others. And we said, how would it still feel like an ownership neighborhood? How much rental could be in the mix and have it still feel like ownership? How much affordable could be in the mix and have it still feel like a market rate development? So we didn't want to identify it just as affordable. So it kind of came from all of these different discussions. And with the different, you're talking about a wide range of incomes. In my mind, it could all be done as affordable, but at this wide range of different levels of income. I don't know, for those of you who didn't get the whole talk last night about what AMI is and what the heck is that, it's a way of talking about, you have a certain income profile here. And so people who are at 50% of that profile are going to be able to afford less than someone that's at 100% of that income range. And so it's an important concept to understand, but it's a little bit jargony. But they could all be affordable, but at different ranges, and then you would attract, a wide range of different types of families and different types of people. I think it could be done. The market rate was part, and also the mixed-use component was to help carry the full cost. And so those were part of the financial considerations. So, and tell me the second question again.
Was if you know, I don't know if you're still involved in the project,
okay,
but
gotcha.
if you know of how many of those market rate units were ultimately occupied by long-term residents.
Okay. It's true, I know a lot more about the affordable because we do collect a lot of statistics on the people who bought the affordable units. So, for instance, I know that at the time people were buying the affordable units, most of them were first-time home buyers, and they were nurses and teachers and emergency workers. They were people who were already living there, and the average was 7 years. So because when you're doing affordable, you have a lot of guidelines you have to meet, you have to collect a lot more data. Incidentally, I know a lot of people who just talked to me who were buying the market rate units. They might be people who'd lived in Boulder for a long time, but they were downsizing. So they'd had a larger home, the kids had moved out, they wanted something smaller. So a lot of the people that I spoke with were long-term community members. They were also people who were drawn by live-work opportunities, and a lot of people drawn by the diversity of the neighborhood. Boulder is a pretty white community, and people wanted, to live someplace where there was a bit more variety. And at Holiday, there are different kinds of families. There's, everybody mixes together pretty well. So people came for reasons like that as well, and they were people who were already living in the community.
In regard to Wellington neighborhood, 56 of those were market rate units. And the price point on those market rate units, coming out of the ground, the initial sale price is $800,000, and they're close to $1 million now for those market rate units. Out of the 56, I'd say at least half of those are actually occupied by people that are working locally, and it was just a great opportunity to have a move up. So the people, and we've seen that in the Breckenridge inventory, folks that might have started out in a subsidized rental unit end up being able to get into their first home ownership, and then they have a family, and actually there's another level of a deed-restricted unit that can work for them. And then we've actually had quite a few people move from deed-restricted to market, and that's kind of a success story.
This question is for Lori. I'm curious, over here, sorry. Where is he? Quick question. In Breckenridge, being that you guys are like Mammoth, a resort community, I'm curious, do you have any locals only deed restricted product? In other words, the only qualification is that you're a local. So therefore, there's some limitation on the price unit because it's driven by what the locals can afford, but not a specific deed restriction.
We have kind of 3 levels of deed restriction. The lightest level of deed restriction is basically no short-term rental. Talked about that a little bit last night, and that was our early version of a deed restriction. And, just having that no short-term rental restriction on it keeps those units occupied by locals. It's really cool. And then our second level of deed restriction, which is also an early version, is a employment only, no appreciation cap, no income cap. We still have quite a few of those. If there's a lot of public funds in the project, then we will use our strictest deed restriction, just to make sure that it's serving the intended target, and that's where we'll put the income caps and the appreciation cap. So we kind of have 3 levels of deed restriction, kind of depending on the amount of public subsidy in it.
I have a question. So when you're the developer, which, we work with a lot of municipalities and they don't want to be developers and they're not qualified to, so somehow you are. This is great. How do you organize yourselves in a responsible way where you're making decisions as a city should and still be a developer?
Really good question. It is interesting. I mean, like I said, we sort of accidentally got into it when we had our private or our nonprofit developer sort of back out. It is a little challenging sometimes because I wear two hats. You know, I have two really distinct sort of goals, and one is to make my projects awesome, to deliver them on time, on schedule, have units that I would want to live in, and be able to hit the price points that we need to hit to make them affordable. On the other hand, I'm a planner for the town of Breckenridge, and I mainly wear my developer hat, to tell you the truth. And I go through the same town processes, the same entitlement processes that a private sector person would have to go to, and we hold ourselves to the exact same standards, and we would view it as a significant failure if we weren't building quality projects that you can't tell that, oh, that's the deed restricted neighborhood over there. You can't differentiate them from what's going on in the private sector. So it is an interesting line to walk. And I think one thing that has helped us a lot is we have a housing subcommittee of council. We talked a little bit about it last night. And it consists of 3 council members, and they help me figure out how to move our affordable housing projects forward. But yeah, we obviously have a significant responsibility to the taxpayers. And, you know, our community has said, spend our dollars on providing housing for us. And so that's what we're doing.
I just want to add and follow up that we followed a slightly different model at Holiday and with other projects we did. And in that case, the city saw themselves as regulators, funders, and they wanted somebody else to do the development. So they had, you know, our agency, which is quasi-governmental, probably more like a nonprofit than anything. They had us do the development, and so same as what Lori's saying, I brought it through. I had to go through development review. I had to do every requirement, and sometimes more, I felt, in terms of really delivering, you know, something the city would feel was excellent. So let's just ask, is there a final question? And then I think we have a wrap-up. So, yeah, and questions for you, which we would like to get to.
I just have a question about, could you just identify how many members you have on the town councils that you deal with? Because we have a 5-member town council, so a 3-member housing authority or housing group would not work. So if you could just let people know that if you have a 7-member board, how that would translate to a 5-member board.
Yeah, we're 7. And so, you know, our committee is 3, and, you know, with a 5, you probably want 2 people. And really the reason we created that is, you know, housing was becoming such a significant issue. That was early 2000s. And the full council has so many priorities that they dig deep into. And we just felt like we needed more council input and more opportunity to work through the weeds with our elected officials.
In my case, I always worked for a 7-member board, and it was the Housing Authority of the City of Boulder board. We had a 9-member council, so, you know, we'd have to take our projects through the planning board and through the council for most of our projects.
Hi, this is a question for Lori. Last night I think we learned that the town of Breckenridge has 1,000 deed restricted units. The town of Mammoth Lakes has 222 deed restricted units, and I was wondering if you could touch on the importance of land banking for the town of Breckenridge.
It has been critical to our ability to somewhat control our destiny. You know, we adopted a housing strategy in 2000, and that's where we established, you know, the incentives we would provide, fee waivers and all of that sort of stuff, but also established our affordable housing strategies. And land banking for us, you know, you can acquire the land and then you can wait until it's time and let the private sector maybe develop on privately held land for a while and move back to your land when you understand what the best use is for it. But we've had a strong emphasis on trying to acquire land whenever we have the opportunity. And that Block 11 parcel was really perfect because it was zoned for basically nothing except we had the potential to put workforce housing on it.
Well, we truly want to thank you for being here and for helping us put together what I think has been a very successful summit. And on behalf of Mammoth, we want to, there's names on here. Cece, if you want to come up and grab yours. And you got to go home with the Mammoth tchotchkes. You cannot. Lori, there's yours.
There's Aaron.
Aaron. Steve's the one that does. Here you go, Wendy.
Cindy's.
Yes, Cindy, there you go.
You have anything else? While Ken's up here, I really want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for all your help and your participation. And I know you guys have a lot to talk about at your future meetings. So thank you very much. You're welcome. And thank you, all our guest speakers. It's been fabulous, the information you shared. And the great thing about having videographed this, we'll be watching you numerous times. So John and I are going to do a quick wrap up, and I do want you to know that they have offered to stay after we finish our wrap up. So if anybody has any additional comments they want to share with our speakers or ask any questions, they will be around for a little while. Okay, John.
Vicki.
How are you?
Great.
Okay. Do you have any
Yes. Wrote them down.
Okay.
So we'll be brief. We talked at the beginning about being able to document our takeaways, observations, what we've seen the last couple of days. For me, the two sessions today clearly demonstrated that we have actionable items that we can take out of the summit. And we need to get them documented. Wendy's going to be writing them up to get them through MLH, through the chamber, through the town council. We have very specific things that we can do. We're looking forward to moving forward. We as a community are on our way. We may never have seen something as big and intense and as ambitious as what we're about to embark on. But it's there. We live in the mountains. We know how to climb mountains. We know how to ski mountains. And we know how to make mountains our partners. This is going to be a lot of fun and very interesting. Our sister mountain towns are invaluable resources. This community for many years has struggled with, well, we want to be like somebody else. We want to be this high-end, glitzy kind of resort destination. That's great. We already are that. We'll be that as we move forward. But when we start thinking about mountain towns and mountain town communities, we have an enormous amount to learn. We learned a lot when the mayor of Aspen came here. We learned a lot from having Lori Breckenridge here. The Mountain Venture Summit is going to be here in February and March. That dialogue needs to continue. These are our peers, the people that we are in business with. It's an invaluable resource to move forward with. And I think finally that as we are willing to take on this challenge and do the things that we want to do, we know that we do not have the bodies, the staff, or the money to do the things that we want to do. That's just part of the challenge. That's just part of doing the things that we have to do to get to where it is that we want to go. And we will be on a ridge soon enough. It's called Money Ridge. And Money Ridge will be behind us. Staff and capacity ridge will be maybe right in front of us. We are mountain people, and we're going to know how to deal with this. So thank you.
All right. Okay. So this part of the evening is kind of fun because John and I did not talk first. But my first takeaway was, we really have accomplished a lot and we should be proud of it. I think sometimes we get a little down on ourselves and we really shouldn't. And secondly, I feel we're an incredibly talented group. And we saw that over and over again the last day and a half. Third, I really believe that every single employer in town, needs to make part of their business plan, how are they going to house their employees? It's not just fair to say, well, the mountain's going to house them and then we're going to use them on weekends or nights or whatever. Every employer has to take a certain ownership in that issue. I feel very strongly after hearing all the speakers that the parcel needs to be master planned, and it's going to take a little while, so it's going to require a little patience to do it well, but in the end we'll be really happy with results. And lastly, this is a little dangerous because I'm not a very big sports fan, but the reality is we are going to make mistakes. And I personally always like to think about baseball batters. If you bat 400, right, that means you strike 6 out of 10 times, okay? So, the reality is we're going to make mistakes. We should expect it, but it's not the end of the world. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to recover and keep moving with laser focus. So those were my takeaways from the last day and a half. Okay.
Thank you. And now we're just going to quickly thank the people that made this possible. It's a miracle that this happened. But it happened, and we're all very happy about that. So we first want to thank everybody that came. All the members of the community came. You know how important this is. You know how valuable it is to be taking part in something like this. Please tell all your friends and neighbors that if you thought it was a great time, it's interesting, say what you truly felt. But all of the deliverables from this summit will be available online. The videos will be available. All the documentation will be available. And it's going to be heading to the town and the council to make these happen. Specifically want to thank my good friends at Mammoth Voices, Mickey Brown, Nicole Godoy, Catherine Taylor, who this is not really the kind of thing that they do, but they stepped up and here we are and we got it all done. Mammoth Resorts, Tom Hodges, Mary Walker, Harley, Krishan, and Rob. Mammoth Resorts, without any equivocation, donated the space, donated their staff. There was not any doubt that this is something they're invested in, they want to make this happen. So Tom, thank you very much for that. We have a list of funders. I don't have all their names here, but they will be posted as we go forward. We raised, maybe you have the names of those folks. We raised, I think, in excess of $20,000 in 3 weeks. Mickey did most of that. Also, the town helped out. But there is a need and a desire and a recognition that housing is the critical issue going forward. We want to thank the funders who made this possible. Finally, all the members of the staff, the MLTPA staff, and other folks, all the town staff have been here all weekend. And anybody else we missed, MLH, of course, Patricia and the board, all the people that participated. This is a truly inspiring event. And we thank you all. We thank the community. We're very much looking forward to what happens tomorrow, and after that, and after that, and after that. So, Mickey.
What else am I going to say?
Did we miss anybody?
No, we didn't miss anybody. But I really want to thank John. I don't know if any of you have not had the opportunity to work with John, but he works with an incredible amount of energy and passion. I thought we should do this program in March, and he convinced me to do it in November, and we did it. So, but really, my hat's off to John for his really dedication to the town on many subjects, but especially for housing. So thank you all, and know we're here to answer any questions you may have.